Story 1. Coming home from a trip, my husband picked me up from the airport in my car. I noticed that the back window was cracked open. It was the kind of small, triangular window that you have to crack open from the inside manually. I asked him who was sitting in the back seat. Without thinking, he said it was his best friend and the friend's wife. I asked, then who was sitting in the front seat? He laughed nervously and didn't answer. That was how I found out he was having an affair. Story 2. He lied about wanting children. He knew he was shooting blanks but let me have 2 procedures under general anesthesia to find out what was wrong with me. His mother ended up mentioning it because she thought for sure he had told me. Story 3. There were a ton of things, but one thing that really did it for me was story time. Our youngest was really ill. I took him to the emergency room 3 times. My husband complained about the cost each time and gaslighted me, saying I was overreacting. The 3rd time, I had to carry him into the hospital, and our kid, 7 years old, finally got a chest x-ray. Within minutes, we were in an ambulance. He had severe pneumonia. Looking back, honestly, he was actively dying. So after 4 IVs, a breathing tube, a pigtail tube to drain the fluid off his collapsing lung, x-ray after x-ray and CT scans, he finally turned a corner. But it wasn't a good prognosis. We were lucky. In the meantime, my mother-in-law came to help with our older child. She proceeded to get absolutely drunk every night she was here, a woman in her 70s, falling down drunk. I was so angry at her selfishness. Also, I missed my own mother's memorial service. Obviously, I had no choice, but it was still a blow. I wanted to be able to remember her with her sisters, see her face, and hear her voice in them. Instead, I listened in on speaker from far away. This was on day 12 of my youngest being hospitalized, and we were waiting to be discharged. I was emotionally, physically, and mentally exhausted. I just wanted to get my son home. As we were waiting for an available doctor to discharge us, my husband called and asked if he needed to be there for his child that barely pulled through on the day of my mother's memorial service, while his mother was there making everything harder. That he even asked that question galled me. It took me 3 trips to the car by myself since, after that long, we had clothes and toiletries, blankets and stuffed animals, puzzles, games, books, and so on. I couldn't look at my husband the same after that. Edit. Thank you, everyone, for your kind words and support. It means a lot. Story 4. After 35 years of marriage, I received a terminal diagnosis. My husband was concerned about being alone after I die, so he started looking for my replacement before I was actually dead. The joke's on him. Now he is alone. And it looks like I may be one of those 1 in a million who can live several decades rather than the usual 2 years with my diagnosis. Story 5. She cheated on me and got pregnant. She blamed it on me not giving her time and attention. I worked 2 jobs and was taking online classes in my spare time so I could get just one better job instead of working 2, and so we could have a better life. Story 6. I went to work for half a day on my first day after maternity leave. My husband rushed out of the house kind of quickly, saying he was late for work. I checked on my 6-week-old son, and he had a bruise on the side of his face in the shape of a handprint. My husband hit him so hard he hemorrhaged the opposite eye. It took everything I had not to kill him. My biggest fear was I didn't want my son in foster care while I went through the process. I never saw this coming. He was always holding, feeding, and changing him. For your information, my son was not cranky and was very healthy, so nothing. I worked 5 miles from home. We had great neighbors. No excuse at all. To say I was shocked is an understatement. Fortunately, I worked for some incredible supervisors. They got me into counseling, which they let me attend while at work. I found a fantastic babysitter. He was charged with misdemeanor child abuse. When he went to court, he said he went to some bogus class and the charge was dismissed. Took me a while, but I realized it was best not to have any contact with him because when I talked to him about child support, I would get so angry with him. If I found out he was dead, I wouldn't care. I decided to just let God sort it out. He's not worth my energy. Story 7. To be honest, we stopped dating as a couple while raising our kids. It's something we both admitted was a huge mistake. Yes, your kids are your priority, but your relationship as 2 human beings needs to be a priority as well. Story 8. My ex is bipolar, and he would often go off his medication abruptly for fun, wreck our lives, then get back on them and try to repair everything, and I was sick of the chaos. Couple that with him quitting his job, lying to me about it, and continuing to leave for work in uniform at the same time for months. I never knew where he was going. Then once he disappeared for several days, and neither I nor his family knew where he went. It turns out he went on a fishing trip with his friends and their wives, but he didn't want me to go, so he just never told anyone about it. So like I said, constant chaos, and I just couldn't deal anymore. Story 9. My ex was verbally and emotionally abusive. Abusers do not show you who they are on day one, unfortunately. It can take years to hit bottom with them and years to get out in one piece. Story 10. Looking back, I had been emotionally detached for a few months, so we wouldn't have lasted this year anyway. But what really pushed it was that he tried to film my 12-year-old daughter while she was showering. 900 images of child pornography were found on his phone by detectives. We had been best friends since 2005, and even now, there were never any signs of him being a creep. You never know who someone really is sometimes. Story 11. He had a second family with a coworker. He even hugged me and told me he was too busy working to have time for one. He didn't even bother showing up for the divorce trial, but his head is going to explode when he hears what the judge agreed to give me. Story 12. Has not ended yet, but maybe soon. My partner is unfulfilled and restless, in and out of jobs constantly, and wants to change countries every time depression hits. They also want to have children and do not understand why I do not feel secure and relaxed enough to do so. I am the main financial provider, stable and reliable, and I would love to just focus on what we have and where we are instead of throwing everything away. I have been living in anxiety for as long as we have lived together and did not know why. Now I think I know, but I do not want to accept it. I am still working on broadening my horizon and relaxing a little, but it gets more difficult the more I try. Story 13. Death by 1,000 cuts really. She started coming home from work miserable every day, ranting and raving about every single perceived slight perpetrated against her. It was non-stop negativity from when she walked in the door through when she ate the dinner I cooked. I wasn't allowed to have friends she didn't know or approve of. Sex was very one-sided. She had to get off first but rarely had the energy left to take care of me. Hated oral but insisted on it for herself. Total starfish. She was mean, just unnecessarily mean, to service staff and to me at home. She hadn't always been like that, but as we grew up, she changed. Anytime I expressed my feelings about this and how it was hurting my feelings for her, instead of making an effort to understand me, she just defended her toxic behavior and said that I was the one with the problem. We tried therapy, but she didn't take it seriously. After a few sessions, she just said, "We're fine, right?" And yet, when I told her I was done, she was blindsided. Story 14. My former spouse spiraled into addiction. Rehabilitation was available, but drugs and alcohol were more attractive. 18 great years and 2 final years of hell before we parted ways. Started out as an annoyance I thought we could handle together. But no. The final straw was when the spouse drank 2 beers in rapid succession, then drove off on a motorcycle that had been purchased by wiping out our savings. No. Story 15. June, and he announces that he is going to take the summer off before looking for another job again. But our child can keep going to daycare so he can have more free time. I can keep working because that's what pays the bills, and he can't do housework or cooking because then what would be the point of having the summer off? This was years ago. I left him by the fall. He didn't believe that I was serious because who doesn't appreciate the great guy he was? Story 16. When we met, I was an out-of-work musician and artist, loving a bohemian lifestyle. No money, but lots of fun. She was an accountant I met in a bar. We got together, got on great, and about a year later she was pregnant. I manned up, got a job, and started to provide. Within 18 months of the birth, we put a down payment on a house. So now I had a career, a child, a beautiful woman, and a mortgage. I was enjoying my life and didn't miss the old days. For years later, I find out she's seeing an out-of-work drummer, living the life I used to live. I guess she had a type. Story 17. It's a long, weird story. We had just moved into the house we had finally bought after being married for 9 years. We got into a fight, and at some point, I asked, "Do you even love me anymore?" And she answered, "I don't know." We went to couples therapy for an initial appointment, and when it was her time for a one-on-one appointment, she never showed. Our therapist called me out of concern. She wouldn't pick up for me either, so I left my brand new job, which I had moved and bought a house for, to go check on her early. She was on the phone with her mom, wouldn't say why she missed the therapy appointment, said she didn't want to do it, and just wants to talk to me instead. I was upset because I spent a lot of money we didn't have on this therapy journey. But fine. Whatever. I figured she didn't like that therapist, and I'd keep her talking until I could find another one. Months later, I accidentally found out she was talking to some 19-year-old kid on the internet and had told him she loved him. We were in our early 30s at the time. Then she proceeded to cut all her hair short and lose her entire mind. I was done. She had multiple chances to tell me what was going on in safe environments with safe people and still chose not to. She forced an argument the day before Thanksgiving, and I told her we were done. We had to go to our relatives and pretend everything was fine the next day. She wouldn't get a job so she could leave, and I didn't have the money to pay for her to leave, so things dragged on for months after that. She finally decided to leave when I was called to the other side of the country for a work emergency of the "if you don't do this, nobody gets paid and we fold up" variety. So I spent a week in California, hoping my wife wasn't looting our house or destroying my things out of spite. That was fun. My folks drove an hour to come feed my cats and make sure my house was still there for me. She just took whatever she could fit in her car and left. Fine with me. I haven't really ever spoken to her again. That's how it ended. We were married 10 years and together for a total of 15. We're strangers now. Story 18, he slept with someone in our bed. Packed his things and changed the locks the day I found out. Filed for divorce a week later. Divorce was finalized within 6 months. Story 19, me moving to several places for him and his career. Mine suffered every time we moved, so we could have stability and a nice place to have kids. At 35 years old, after 14 years married, I had to hear, "I don't want kids anytime soon." I then focused on myself. Story 20. I asked my ex for 3 things. 1. Get urgent home repairs done. Stop speaking negatively to me. Literally would go months without a positive word to me, always criticizing me, degrading me. Put the thermostat above 60 degrees in the winter. I worked from home, and it was so cold from November to April. I told him this in October. By January, I moved out. He tried to address the second request, but would inevitably lapse back into criticizing me when one of our adult sons was there. He swore he was trying and wanted to stay together. In actuality, he had rekindled a relationship with his ex from 40 years ago behind my back. He had said for 35 years that he hated her. The final straw was when he said I had to accept her as part of his life if we stayed together. That was it for me. He prioritized her over me. I was done and quietly scheduled an appointment with an attorney. 2 weeks later, he called me and said very condescendingly that if I was going to be a baby about it, he would give her up. I was shocked and told him I was done. He picked her over me and he could go live with her for all I cared. He thought he would keep all our financial assets and attempted to hide the money he cashed out secretly. He believed he was a better person than me and that the judge would agree he deserved to keep his money. He was surprised when the judge called him a fraud and gave me my half. I haven't heard from him in almost 2 years and hope it stays that way. I'm an older woman now. I have my friends, my kids and grandkids, a little part-time job, and a nest egg for emergencies. I have no interest in remarrying or even dating. For the first time in my life, I am doing what I want when I want with nobody to criticize me for it. Story 21. I was diagnosed with a congenital birth defect in my uterus that prevented me from having children. He wanted biological children. Years later, after the separation, I received a referral for a magnetic resonance imaging scan to confirm the diagnosis my specialist was 99% sure I had. It turned out the 1% possibility was correct, and it was fixable with quick day surgery. I went on to have a successful pregnancy and had my daughter in 2020. Story 22. Dad cheated on mom with one of his colleagues at work. It wasn't the adultery type of cheating, but he gave all his time and attention to her, would give and receive gifts, talk for hours on the phone, and so on. And it wasn't his first time. Now my dad is trying to get back with my mom, but my mom refused completely. Story 23. I was abused and couldn't take it anymore. I looked in the mirror and saw a husk of myself. I came to terms with the fact that no amount of love I gave him would stop him from abusing me. This March, it will be 3 years since I left. Story 24. She basically said, "You're cheating on me, and nothing you say will convince me otherwise. And you're going to give me your phone so I can prove it. But it's going to take a while because I don't know where or what the proof is. I just know it's there." She said if I didn't hand over the phone, she'd never trust me again. I said, "That's fine. I don't need you to ever trust me again." I left within the hour and never saw her again. After 13 years together, married almost 10. I never cheated. But after years of mental and emotional abuse, I'd had enough of her unhinged accusations.